My niece started telling people I was sleeping around, whispering it to relatives, neighbors, even one of my husband's coworkers. The goal was obvious: wreck my marriage and sit back like it was entertainment. When I confronted her, she rolled her eyes and said I was too sensitive. I, 34 male, have spent the last decade building a career as a senior project manager for a major construction firm. In my world, your word is your bond, and your reputation is your currency. I handle multi-million-dollar contracts and government-vetted security clearances. My wife, 32F, is a pediatric nurse, the kind of person who works 12-hour shifts and still finds the energy to sit with a scared child until they fall asleep. We spent years saving for our home, a quiet sanctuary we thought was impenetrable. 6 months ago, that fortress was breached from the inside. My sister's daughter, my niece, 19F, had dropped out of community college and was effectively drifting. My sister begged us to take her in so she could find a job in the city. I've always been big on family loyalty, so I agreed. I thought I was being a mentor. In reality, I was letting a Trojan horse into my guest room. My niece is the kind of person who views the world as a background for her social media feed. If there isn't drama happening, she feels like she's disappearing. For the first few months, she was just messy and lazy. But then, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted. I'd walk out to get the mail, and my neighbor, a guy I've shared beers with for years, would suddenly find a reason to run inside. The local grocery store clerk gave me these weird, pitying looks. I felt like a stranger in my own zip code. Then the phone calls started. My mother called me, sounding like she was in the middle of a nervous breakdown. She told me my niece had been confiding in the extended family that she was scared to be in the house because of all the strange men I was bringing over while my wife was on her night shifts. She told my aunts I was sleeping around and that she had seen me with different people in our own bed. My phone started blowing up with checked-in texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all asking if I needed to talk. I was paralyzed. I don't even have time for a hobby, let alone a rotation of affairs. But it wasn't just family gossip. A week later, my boss called me into his office. He looked sick to his stomach. He showed me an anonymous email sent to our HR department's ethics tip line. It claimed I was unstable, frequently seen at a specific dive bar across town bragging about cheating on my wife, and that my personal scandals were making me a security liability for the firm. The email had photos of my car parked at that bar, a bar I'd visited exactly once, 6 months ago, for a coworker's retirement party. I went home early and found my wife sitting at the kitchen table. She wasn't crying. She was vibrating with a cold, hard rage. She had received a message from a friend of a coworker saying that people at the hospital were whispering about my double life. My niece was in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a bag of chips, watching a reality show as if she didn't have a care in the world. When I confronted her, I expected her to be ashamed. I expected a denial. Instead, she didn't even look up from her phone. She just sighed and said, "Honestly, you're being so sensitive. It's not that deep. You and your wife are like NPCs. Your lives are so boring. I thought a little drama would actually make things interesting for once. If your marriage is so rock solid, why are you so mad? It's just words." I told her she had 1 hour to get her things and leave. That's when the bored teenager act dropped, and I saw the predator underneath. She sat up, looked me dead in the eye, and smiled. "Actually, I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I've been here for 6 months. I get mail here. I have residency. In this state, I'm a tenant. You have to give me a formal 30-day notice and go through the full eviction process in court. If you touch my stuff or change the locks, I'll call the cops for an illegal lockout and sue you for every penny you have. So, I think I'll go take a nap in my room now." She walked away laughing. I was stuck. I knew she was right about the law. If I forced her out, she'd have the police at my door within the hour, and my professional reputation, already under fire, would be incinerated by a domestic disturbance report. My wife looked at me and asked if this was our life now, living with a sociopath who was actively trying to destroy us from within. I spent that entire night in my home office. I didn't get mad. I got methodical. I'm a project manager. I deal with high-stakes contracts and difficult stakeholders for a living. I started by pulling the logs from our home network. I found that my niece had been using a packet sniffer to intercept traffic. She had accessed my wife's iPad, which was synced to our home cloud, and downloaded private, domestic photos of us. She'd been cropping them and sending them to people with captions that suggested they were taken by the other woman. But then I found the real motive. I found a series of emails on a shared tablet she'd used in the kitchen and forgotten to log out of. They were between her and my sister. My sister and her husband were drowning. They owed $40,000 in high-interest debt, their credit was shot, and their house was entering the first stages of foreclosure. They had coached my niece to move in and dismantle my marriage. The plan was to make my wife leave me, get me depressed and dependent on my niece's company, and then convince me to let the rest of the family move in to help me through the transition. They were literally planning to occupy my house and use my home equity as their personal bailout fund. The entitlement was sickening. They weren't family, they were a strike team. My sister's emails even joked about how easy I was to manipulate because I valued family over common sense. I didn't call my sister. I didn't yell at my niece. I waited until Monday morning. I went to the county courthouse and filed for a temporary protective order, TPO, based on stalking and digital harassment. In our jurisdiction, if you can prove a pattern of behavior that causes significant emotional distress and involves unauthorized access to personal devices or cyberstalking for the purpose of harassment, a judge can issue an emergency order. Crucially, a TPO allows the court to grant exclusive possession of a residence to the victim, effectively bypassing the 30-day eviction notice because the safety and mental well-being of the inhabitants is at risk. I also gathered affidavits from my boss and my wife's coworker. When the judge saw the emails about the plan to take over the house, his expression shifted from boredom to genuine disgust. He signed the order immediately. I arrived home at 4 p.m. with a sheriff's deputy. My niece was in the kitchen, making a mess and acting like she owned the place. When the deputy handed her the TPO and told her she had 15 minutes to pack a bag or go to jail, she finally realized she wasn't the lead character in a movie anymore. She tried the "I'm just a kid" routine, crying and saying I was scaring her. The deputy, who had read the report about her hacking our devices and threatening our livelihoods, wasn't moved. "Pack your toothbrush, kid. You're leaving," he said. She ended up on the sidewalk with her clothes in trash bags. My sister came screeching into the driveway shortly after, screaming at me about family loyalty and how I was destitute of a heart. I didn't even roll down the window. I just pointed to the deputy. They left, but I wasn't done. I was just getting started. I hired a heavy-hitter civil lawyer. We sued my niece for defamation per se and tortious interference with a business relationship. Since she had sent those lies to my employer, she had caused actual, quantifiable damage to my professional standing and future promotion tracks. During the deposition, she was forced to admit under oath, with her lawyer looking like he wanted to jump out a window, that she had fabricated every single story. She admitted she had never seen me with another woman. She admitted she hacked our iPad to find ammunition. I won a judgment for $150,000. My sister and her husband tried to hide their assets, but I filed a writ of execution. Since they were already behind on their mortgage, the bank was already circling like sharks. I had the sheriff seize my sister's luxury SUV, the one she was bragging about on Instagram while her mortgage went unpaid, and my niece's expensive electronics and camera gear. I didn't keep a dime of the money. I had the proceeds from the sheriff's sale donated to a local nonprofit that helps families navigate domestic legal abuse. The final chef's kiss moment happened 2 months later. My sister's house finally hit the foreclosure auction. Because they were so busy fighting my lawsuits and losing their cars, they couldn't scrape together the funds to stop the bank. They called me, sobbing, asking if they could just sleep on the floor for a few days because they had nowhere to go. I told them that according to my niece, my life is way too boring for that kind of drama. I suggested they find a motel, and maybe they could use the entertainment of their own consequences to keep them warm at night. The entitlement they showed, thinking they could destroy my life and then use me as a safety net, was finally their undoing. My wife and I are back in our fortress. We have a new security system, new locks, and a much smaller, more honest family tree. My boss, after seeing the court's findings and the confession from the deposition, actually apologized and gave me a performance bonus for how I handled the crisis without letting it affect my project delivery. It turns out that when you try to treat someone's life like a game, you should make sure you aren't playing against a pro who knows how to read the rulebook. If you enjoyed seeing a family of parasites lose their host, feel free to subscribe. Unlike my niece, I actually have the receipts for everything I say.